Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host Raghunath and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show and welcome to Sleep In Sunday. It's Interview Sunday with our good friend Gaura Vani. Now, I just want you guys to know.
What?
Gaura Vani to me is like my favorite, I'll just say favorite singer in the world. And imagine if your favorite singer in the world was also your best friend. Imagine that. Imagine if you're like, Mick Jagger's my best friend. Or Cyndi Lauper is my best friend. I don't know where I got Cyndi. I just pulled Cyndi Lauper out of singers. Who else is a singer, I could say? You know, Johnny Rotten is my best friend. Gaura Vani is my best friend. He's my favorite singer. What a great thing to have in my life. Welcome, Gaura.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Haribol to everyone. Haribol Kaustubha.
Haribol.
And your mom's here too. Rukmini
awesome
Walker
people.
is here too.
Nice to see you all.
You were one of our first guests. You know that?
Yeah. Before it was like a thing, I was like on Wisdom of the Sages.
You were. We were in India together. That was fun.
Hey, before we dive into this though, Raghu, maybe we should say a little prayer, right?
We have a prayer. We have a couple prayers going out today, actually.
Okay.
It's Prayer Sunday, but our good Zoomer / other, she goes back and forth between the both, Amy Stellar. We're sending out prayers to her family and her daughter, who's in the hospital right now, and it's serious. So we want to say some serious prayers. We like to chant the Maha Mantra as a prayer, a group prayer going out to quick healing and recovery and deep connection. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Also a prayer, I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a massive dam break in India this morning. Do you know that?
I didn't hear that. Where?
Up in Uttarakhand, up in the Himalayas on the Ganga.
Yeah.
And so when those dams break, they flood places, and there's just like missing people. It's super, super scary. So prayers out to all the people going through some pain in India. You just go to Times of India, and it's on the front page.
Okay.
And on that note, here's Gaura Vani.
Hey, I got a happier note. I want to say I want to say happy birthday to my wife. It's Gita Priya's birthday today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The wives. You know, that's one of my questions today, Gaura. We're going to dive in these questions because my wife was having a talk to Kaustubha's wife, Gita, and Gita said, you know, there's got to be there's got to be a interview or a book or something about like what's it like to be married to one of these people who are very much like in the public arena in Bhakti. Like, what's that like? Like, what's it like for your good wife, Vrinda? You know, you're gregarious, you're outspoken, you take off on the road for God knows how long. You know, you're a public figure. And I don't think every wife or husband, because there's women in that too. I don't even know if they sign up for that. Maybe it doesn't maybe appear like that, but that's what it becomes. What's it like for your wife to be married to you?
What is it? That's my
Welcome to the
favorite
show.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting question because there's always that, even when people are not in a spiritual community, but they're just married to someone who's kind of a public personality, some sort of semi-celebrity, there's all that kind of weirdness. When I was a kid, I used to be in Hollywood, and I always found it strange that people would, like you see your husband on screen or your wife on screen kissing somebody, and
Right,
like
that's another weird
it's
one.
like a love story. It's like the greatest love story ever told, and you're like, that is my wife. So like I thought about that, but then I think there's also um, when it's in a spiritual community, there's also this weird sense of reality versus perception. So there's all the drama of just having to deal with the public and private life, but then there's also like in bhakti, none of us are perfect until
Until you're
We are.
perfect.
until you're perfect, right? So none of us are perfect, and we're a work in progress. And being some sort of a teacher, and then at home you're kind of a mess. Like that's interesting for a wife or a husband because they know the real you. They know what you struggle with, you know? I mean, it's Gita Priya's
And they
birthday.
remind you.
How does Gita Priya deal with having a perfect husband, Kaustubha?
Yeah, what's that
She
like?
tells me it's really difficult to have such a perfect husband. She struggles with it, but
She's working on it.
somehow she gets by. I don't know. I gotta tip my hat to it.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think bhakti also what you could talk about, with kids too. I mean, my kids do love kirtan, but every once in a while they're like, why do we have to do another kirtan for some Zoom thing? Like we just want to play PlayStation or whatever. So
Well,
yeah, it's
anyway,
interesting to mix it up.
big shout out to men or women behind the scenes that have to deal with this. And again, not necessarily what they signed up for. And sometimes it could get like, people can get into that private space. I'm like one of these guys. I have no private space, and it's not necessarily a good thing.
Raghu, how does your wife deal with the fact that you have no private space?
I think it's tough. I think it's tough. Big shout out to my wife as well. I got a quick question for you that is a good one too, because I think we have a lot of people that are. It's a new spirit of bhakti. You know what I mean? It's a spirit of bhakti right now, and so many people. It's like an overwhelming tsunami of love coming, and so many people are getting interested in bhakti, and they've been into it for a year and getting really serious or 6 months and getting really serious about it, or just hearing about it and realize this is what I need. There is definitely a golden age going on right now, and I feel like we're in the midst of it. But my question is, you've been into this since you were a kid. You were one of those kids who grew up in bhakti. Your parents are great devotees. Your mother's on the show right now.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, Mom.
There she is.
You can wave, Rukmini. We're all waving to you. There we go. Oh, everyone's waving. What would you say for people who are new that cuts through the romance and says, okay, what are the sinkholes that you should watch out for in a spiritual life? Name like 3 sinkholes that you would really watch out for on those who are new in their spiritual life, and actually not even new. I'm always trying to watch out for sinkholes. Matter of fact, some people have been for a while. They're like, I'm good. I got this. I know all the thing. I know how to tie a dhoti. I'm okay. But what are the sinkholes we should watch out for? I know how to tie a dhoti. I'm okay. Don't tell me.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The thought that came to mind is I don't know how familiar some of you are with His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami.
Mm-hmm.
But Bhakti Tirtha Swami was the first kind of, as far as history is able to we're able to perceive history, the first black-bodied Vaishnava sannyasi. So it's possible that 1,000 years ago or something, we're not sure, but basically in recent memory over the last, hundreds of years, the first black-bodied senior renunciant in our lineage. And he had to deal with, I mean, let's face it, the world is incredibly racist and sexist and all those things. I mean, it's this the nature of the world. He had to deal with that even in the spiritual community, you know? He said this thing that always struck me. He said, um, if I found something better, I would leave tomorrow. So his kind of thing was he had devoted his whole life to being a renunciant and a monk and a teacher, but he was like hungry and thirsty for how to take his spiritual life to the next level. And if he found something better to be doing, he was going to leave and go do that. Like he kept that kind of level of enthusiasm and commitment to his spiritual life. So the way I connect that with what you're saying is I think it's important for us to always be vigilant to look for how to deepen and enrich our spiritual lives because it will ebb and flow. And bhakti is not, bhakti is, they say bhakti's simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy to surrender to Krishna when you feel abused by your life. Right? The easy thing is to start to blame. The easy thing is to start to be the victim. It's not easy to say, I have faith that Krishna is guiding me through my life, even in the midst of terrible difficulties. But when we look at Bhagavatam, we see that's the example. Prahlad never said, God, why me? He just never said that. And it's like, if we put ourselves in Prahlad's circumstance, it's impossible. It's impossible for me that I would have not at some point gone, what? Why? Why are you doing this to me? But the difference between Prahlad, who is a self-realized person, is he always says, I know there's some reason why you're doing this, and so I'm going to approach it with love and trust. And that is not easy to do. And that's what Bhakti's calling us to do. So it feels good, and then it plateaus, and then you can get bored, and then you can make a little progress, and you can feel good again, and it plateaus. But Bhakti's not about how it feels, right? And I think for me, that's what I've been trying to lean into recently, especially for those of you who don't know, after I was raised, my mom raised me as a Krishna kid, and I went to traditional school in India, whatever, all the things that, you try to do to help your kid. And it took me 42 years before I made the official commitment to be initiated in this lineage. I saw the world, I saw myself, and I just thought, why am I going to do something that I'm not going to be able to carry on with? Like, why am I going to fake this just because it's like a social thing to do? In fact, Radhanath Swami, who's my spiritual master, my teacher, my guru, he told me a few years before, he said, don't be initiated because of any sort of social pressure. You have to only take initiation. This is what he said to me. When you wake up in the morning, and maybe he'd give a different piece of advice to somebody else, but what he told me is only get initiated when you wake up one day and you think, I can't go on in my life any longer unless I'm initiated. Which is a really fascinating piece of advice. So I've been trying to lean into that understanding that bhakti is a calling to take our lives ever more seriously in the pursuit of, that love that can transform any circumstance. And if we're not feeling the love that can transform even the darkest circumstance, it means that we're not connecting with it. I mean, that's the faith that bhakti requires. That book, Salted Bread?
I never read that one, but I've heard so much about it.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I just know about the story, right? Yeah. So it's a book about Russian devotees during the height of the Cold War, and they would send them to psychiatric prisons for practicing bhakti.
Yeah.
And they would take away every article that they could that would remind them of being a devotee, like including their beads, their, any markings, like nothing. And so as a commitment to try and maintain their sadhana, their practice, they would make chanting beads out of bread, I guess, that they
Croutons, kind of.
Crouton, like yeah. Gaura, just to pause you for a second before you go on, one of our guests, Shama Sundar, who's been on the show, he was the one that set up this visa, which was unheard of, to get Prabhupada, an Indian Swami, a master of Bhagavad Gita, Vedic literature, to go in to communist Russia. In what year was that? Like 1973 or something like that?
Yeah, it's kind of a mysterious thing how it even happened.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then from that, like, okay, now how am I going to teach the Bhagavad Gita in communist Russia? It's a crime. They met one person in a supermarket who said, "Are you a Swami? Can you please do you know the Bhagavad Gita? Can you teach me the Bhagavad Gita?" And Prabhupada took this one person and taught him the Bhagavad Gita, initiated him, and that one person started a whole underground Bhakti movement in communist Russia.
I think the connection's even looser than that. I think what happened was the guy came up to them and said,
"Are you American?
You have blue jeans? Are you from America?"
Yeah.
And Sham Sundar said, "Not only are we from America, but we know the Beatles. Come meet my Swami." And the guy's like, I don't know. Okay, whatever. Yeah.
Oh, that was even better. And while we're at it, we're going to teach you the Bhagavad Gita. Do you mind starting an underground Bhakti movement that's against the law, subject to criminal, charges?
And his life,
that's
he
basically
suffered
what
for
happened.
it. He suffered for it. Yeah.
All of those devotees, once the KGB found out, everybody suffered. And so now, unpause, please continue the story. They're all in prison.
Yeah, well, it's incredible because the Krishna movement in Russia now is one of the most thriving anywhere in the world. It's quite fascinating. It's interesting because, and Kaustubha, you maybe can speak more about this. It reminds me, Prabhupada meeting that young man and just sitting him down and just kind of like downloading bhakti, like fire hose, like reminds me of Lord Chaitanya and Rupa Goswami. Where he just said, sit down, and he what was it, like for 7 days or something like that? He just gave him the whole, am I getting this wrong?
Well, yeah, or actually to Sanatana Goswami, it always confused me a little bit, but it's in the Madhya Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this great, huge work on the life
of Lord Chaitanya.
But it's more than just a biography. It's also, it's kind of like, what do you call a book when it's like a religious faith kind of tenets are laid out in it, So it's a biography of Sri Chaitanya, but it's also the clarifying and establishing even, the nuances of the Gaudiya Vaishnavism of this particular branch of bhakti.
Yeah.
So there's a few chapters towards the end of the Madhya Lila where Sri Chaitanya is speaking to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami.
Two brothers,
yeah.
Who were basically billionaires. They were like, it was like if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos were brothers.
And they gave up everything. But
they were running the government.
Yeah, and they were running the government.
And they gave up everything to move to a jungle and follow an avatar.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great movie right there.
It would make a great movie. Gaura, work on that movie.
Can we bring it back to your salted bread story? Because you were going somewhere with that.
I was? Where was I going?
I don't know, but it was something about pitfalls and
yeah.
pitfalls.
Well,
and seeing the pain. I traced this back. Seeing the pain, seeing the beauty in a painful situation.
It's so challenging. My mom, one of the things that my mom spoke to me about once, by the way, my mom, you guys should have my mom back on your show again. My mom is a great teacher and, my first bhakti teacher. And, that's actually on this subject of growing up as a Krishna kid. That is something that is beautiful, that you begin learning the principles of bhakti from your parents right away, even if you can't grasp it until you're 42.
Yeah.
But one of the things my mom talks about is the relationship between dharma and karma in society. Like how someone who's suffering through something, according to the Vedic understanding, should see this is actually my karma. And it's really, really hard to express that or teach that to someone who's suffering, because basically they're feeling victimized by their life or their circumstances. But then that's balanced by the idea of dharma. And that dharma is what you practice for yourself when relating to others. Karma is what you practice for yourself. So like the understanding of like, this is my reaction. This is from what the seeds that I've sown have brought me into this circumstance. But when looking at others, you see them through the filter of dharma. How can I serve them? How can I care for them? How can I uplift them? How can I take their burden as my own burden? And too often in, kind of the shorthand, we're like, oh, sorry, buddy, it's your karma. You know what I mean? But that's only half of the picture. To understand, for example, one of the subjects that came up in such a strong way over this last year was the racial injustice in our country. The lack of equity, even approaching equity in at least our country. Now, there's a million ways to see that conversation, but one important way is just to understand my role and my responsibility as a bhakta in the world is to try and uplift others, not to try and tell them what their karma is or isn't, or what, their past life had brought them here. That's for them to discuss with God. But for me, my role is to have a dharmic contribution to their lives. How can I apply bhakti in my life to help others? And so in this conversation about pitfalls, it's really interesting and challenging for us to see that everything that's happening to us is our own karma. Take full responsibility for everything that's happened. It's like some people are like, well, that's so self-abusive, I'm having a difficult time and now I'm just going to blame myself. Well, a friend of mine asked me, why is it that everything good we say God did it and everything bad we say I did it to myself? Like, how's that fair? And that seems like so out of balance. But bhakti exists, of course, in all these different traditions, and you see glimpses of it in people like Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa did not think that she was being very successful in dealing with the poverty of India. I don't know if you've ever heard her speak about this. It's fascinating.
No, share.
She was not very hopeful about ending poverty. Like, it wasn't like she said, oh, if we just get the resources, we're doing good stuff, and this, within 5 years, our plan, that wasn't her. Even though she did so much to care for people, her idea was, I'm just doing my tiny part. And because I'm doing my tiny part, I'm pleasing Jesus. And that peace is my peace. And I'm not, I don't have some of these great quotes, but I heard a beautiful one the other day about that. I think I heard it from my mom, actually. So bhakti creeps out. I mean, as a parent, I'm always worried about my kids and fussing, and I pray that I'm doing a good job. I don't know that I'm doing a good job. But have you ever met those parents who are so balanced, and that everything their kid does, they just love and they laugh, and any naughtiness, they're just like kind of, like, oh, these kids are so wonderful. It's like everything is so happy and wonderful all the time. Have you ever met a parent?
Hate those happy parents. Hate those guys.
It's like any crazy thing that comes up, they just laugh it off, and it's like, oh, it's on this big joyful festival all the time, But I can't be like that. I don't know how to be like that. I try, but I guess I'm bringing that up to say that it seems like those people somehow or other are perceiving maybe a bhakti-filled version of parenting. Where it's like, it's going to be okay because I'm not in control. And all I can do is shower you with love and appreciation and encouragement, knowing that these things are going to work themselves out between you and God. I can't insert myself into that relationship. I don't know how to get there, but I find that fascinating.
Well, it seems like you're saying that that if you take the philosophy, the yoga philosophy or bhakti philosophy, that the truths are liberating, but they're also can seem almost like well, you use the term self-abusive.
Well, I mean, I've heard people say that in my years of trying to present Bhakti philosophy to people. I've had people say that, like, I'm tired of serving people. I've had people say that, like, I've been serving people my whole life. I'm sick of it. What has it gotten me?
Right. And so but you're provide so building into that, you're saying you came forward with this dharma and karma thing, and if I understand it correctly, you're saying the troubles in my own life I see as a result of my own karma. But when I deal with you, and if I take that attitude, that's going to be healthy for me, because it means I'm going to make the improvements in my own character that I need to make. But when I'm talking to you, I'm coming through with compassion. I'm not saying that it would likely be counterproductive to just say, well, that's your karma. I'm coming to you with compassion and trying to share those same truths, but in a really non-judgmental way. That's
Exactly.
the formula.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. That's what I'm working with. I've one,
With
you know,
others, go on. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say one thing I've noticed is when, if you ever spend time with someone who's really mastered something, they're so easeful with it. Have you ever noticed that?
Easeful, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like not a big deal. Like, if you like, whether it's music or yoga, it's like, nutrition. They're like, oh, that's not a big deal. It's just a cup of coffee. Like, oh, that pose, you'll get that pose eventually. You're doing great. Tadasana or whatever. It's like everything is so simple. But
Tadasana is just standing up. You know that, right?
That's why I said Tadasana. You're doing such a good job. Yeah, so that's one of the poses I can do. That and Shavasana.
You're very good at that one. Shavasana.
I also
one of the masters I've seen in Shavasana.
I also have managed the chair pose for hours a day.
You're also really good at that that mantra that you chant during Shavasana, the one that sounds like.
That's just the cosmic Om, Raghu. You don't understand. But
Go on, Boo. Carry on.
But yeah, Bhakti, I think, is that magic space between those things where we're in the stretch zone, but we're also easeful. And how to get there is approaching mastery. I don't know when that's going to happen. But sorry, Raghu.
You're doing good. You're doing great. Music. Interesting thing about music. Either in the Bhakti world or not in the Bhakti world. It's, I was never, truthfully, in my own life, and I've been a professional musician, I don't think my calling is to be a musician. It's not like I'm not built. Like musicians, I know musicians, they like, if they're not doing music, they lose their marbles, I'm more of like I like to speak. I'm not very talented at music. You are actually a musician, sir. And so what do you do, especially during COVID? Like, you can't do your dharma. You were born to do music, and it's so wonderfully tied to liberation and your spiritual life and your spiritual practices. It's really a great, if you like music, this is a wonderful spiritual path. So what do you do in COVID when a lot of musicians experience this without COVID? Like, they can't make any money at music, but they love music. What do you think about dharma and music and COVID and life? What do you do when you can't get paid for what you're born to do?
Money and art, money and life. It's such a mystical thing. It's funny doesn't it feel like when money's flowing, like it's never going to stop, and then it stops?
I'm waiting for it to flow.
Yeah, but I heard Prabhupada once said that Prabhupada was next level. He was just like seeing things that other people weren't seeing. Prabhupada said, why is there this anxiety about money? He said, you can just reach out in the air and grab it. He just saw it as energy floating. It's like, if you just need it, just grab it. This is off topic slightly, but I always thought about this. Lakshmi, or fortune, is considered to be the wife of God.
Interesting concept, isn't it?
Isn't it?
It's not God, it's the wife of God.
So in other words, if you get God, it's like, if you come to my house, you meet my wife, right? So it's like the idea of chasing money without some sort of spiritual grounding is like trying to get to know my wife but not wanting to know me. It's like creepy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Why is this creepy guy hanging outside my house talking to my wife?
Trying to
It's
talk
weird.
to my wife, knocking on her window.
Hey, can you just talk to me for a couple of minutes? I just need you for a couple of minutes.
I saw your husband pull away. Let's talk.
And and they say in the story of Ramayana, that's one of the things that Ravana embodies, is this idea of he wants Sita without Ram.
He wants the Shakti, right?
So he's trying to get that, all of that, the fortune and yeah. So, I'm a little embarrassed actually to talk about this because I know a lot of people have struggled during COVID financially. And so I'm a little hesitant because for me, it's been this really blessed time. And I beg you guys to please accept this as a blessing and give me your blessings that it continues. But this is what happened to me. Sorry, I can't exactly answer that question, but here's what happened to me.
What happened?
About a year or two ago now, I started hearing myself speaking like this. Someone would say, "What are you doing, this winter?" And I said, "I'm going to this stupid thing in the Bahamas." Or like, these guys, this thing, this festival in Barcelona, I don't really want to go, but and I started hearing myself talk like that. And I'm like, hang on one second. Are you complaining about having to travel and do music? And I started realizing something's switching for me upstairs. I need to re-examine what's going on with me. Like I could hear my mouth and I couldn't stop it. So I started praying to Krishna, like, I think I need a change. And in June, the year right before COVID, so June, COVID kind of hit in February or whatever, January, February, March. So in June, I kind of said, like, I got to stop this. So I started trying to figure out how to put the brakes on. So I had planned all my year out. We do this India, we all do India tours and stuff. So like I had a group coming with me to India. And after that, it was like, that's it. I'm not doing anything else. So I'm in India and someone says, have you heard about this thing going on in China right now? And I was like, no, I just got to get home. I don't have anything, And I got home and all of a sudden coronavirus takes over the world. And what had happened was, it was like January, February, and people started contacting, this is before Corona went crazy. People started contacting me. Hey, can we get you in April? Hey, I just want to make sure, are you available to come? And I was like, how do I tell my friends no that I've been working with for 10 years? How do I tell them no? And I kind of was like putting off making the calls, and then the world shut down.
So let me get this straight. You found yourself saying these things like, why do I have to go to Barcelona? Why do I have to go to exotic places? Why do I have to bathe in the tropical waters of the Caribbean? Why? And then you said, okay, if I'm going to complain about it, I'm not going to do it. And that's what happened. And then all of a sudden, the secret, the power of intention, the world shuts down because of you.
Well, the way I see it is that maybe Krishna, out of pity for me, maybe Krishna allowed me to start shifting plans so that it didn't fall so heavy and hard on myself and my family. Like actually, I had kind of decided to not do this for this year. And so somehow or other for me, I was really ready to be home and spend some time with my family. And it's been a shift after 10 years of traveling almost nonstop. I've been able to be home with my family. My kids just now are starting school, back in school right now. And so we've had a lot of time together. And it's been a real reset for my life. I'm rethinking my music. I'm doing a lot more recording these days. I don't know if you guys heard, I just released a new song with my daughter called Compass, which if you guys...
Yeah. Can you share? Please share. How can we hear
that? If you guys would love to hear some bhakti expressed in both chant and English, please check out our song called Compass. You can get it on Spotify, any of the ways to corporatize music, you can find my music there.
So we search Gaura, Vani, Compass,
and it's featuring my daughter Revati Prema.
Nice.
So yeah, so
She's so good.
I'm actually through a friend's mercy, I'm kind of rethinking. I'm doing what's going to sound so boring. I'm working in UI UX right now.
Wow, I don't even know what that is. It is boring.
So right. Okay, so let's bring this back to bhakti. So the question is, and this is a story that's been in my family for a long time. My father was is a brilliant artist. I have two dads. I have a stepdad and I have a dad. And my dad, also a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, is a brilliant artist. And Prabhupada had him travel to India to learn all these ancient Indian arts, and he was teaching people and doing all kinds of things. A lot of the Krishna paintings that you see are my dad's paintings.
We
Really,
were talking about that just the other day. The one where Jara, the hunter, is bowing down
that's
to
a
Vishnu.
beautiful
That's
one.
his painting, right?
That's his painting.
Incredible
Another
painting.
beautiful one is Kunti and the Sun God. It's a
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love that one.
thing.
That giant one, the sun god coming through the window. You
Yeah.
painted that?
Yeah. My
That
dad.
is a great painting.
Krishna
Yeah,
and Arjuna on
and
the chariot, where the chariot's going straight at you.
he also did the original Bhagavad Gita cover. So the first old version of Gita that everyone handed out 1 million copies of to the world. That's my dad's painting also. So
Wow.
he once said to
Pretty good
Prabhupada,
resume.
what's that?
Pretty good resume.
Yeah. He once said to my father, when I have a son, should I train him to be an artist? And Prabhupada said to him, he in India, artists are like different, Prabhupada used the word potter, like someone who just makes cups for the Nimbu Pani or the chaiwala, right? And he said, you are not a potter. You are a Vaishnava. And one day you will be called to set aside your art materials and worship Krishna, right? He wanted him to be attached to being a devotee of Krishna and not be attached to being an artist.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Higher than our dharma is our eternal dharma.
Swadharma. That's that verse that
Swadharma.
Radhanath Swami quoted the other day that he says all the time. Kaustubha, you probably know this. Savaipum sam paro dharmo yato bhaktira dhokshate. Ahoitukiya
Haitukiya pratiyata.
Atma super
Yama Ciprocity. I know it too, damn it. I know it too.
Raghu, yeah. So,
Stupid gets all the credit, man.
well, no, I mean, these verses, like at some point, like we start learning these verses because they're like little keys that unlock little, reminders of, that Radhanath Swami spoke so beautifully about this. He said that this verse, understanding this verse, changed the trajectory of his life. I appreciated him saying that so much. What does the verse mean, Raghu?
I don't know that.
I don't know. I just parroted the Sanskrit. The supreme occupational dharma for all humanity is that by which one comes to the loving service of the Supreme Lord. Such activities should be unmotivated and uninterrupted to fully satisfy the soul. So out of all our dharmas, it's all useless unless it brings us to love of God. And to really satisfy ourselves, it must be fixed. It must be part of our inhales and our exhales at every moment. But that's real dharma. We throw this word dharma, especially in the yoga community. We throw it around. What is your dharma? Your duty. It sometimes gets translated into, what are you good at? Follow your passions. But it really has to do with what you're good at that will lead you to deep connection with the Supreme, deep connection with the love of God. That's the supreme dharma. Good night, everybody.
It's interesting, I don't know. I don't want to hijack the show here, but something like I said, I've been thinking a lot about over this year is the situation of Black people in this country and around the world, but especially in this country. And I've been reading some material and some stuff about the history in this country, and I read a really fascinating book called Tulsa 1921. I think it's called The Making of a Massacre. And it's about Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how basically this town was burned to the ground out of kind of like misplaced anger of local Tulsans. Actually, it was based on this thing that didn't actually happen. And afterwards, the young black guy and the young black girl who supposedly had some, kind of inappropriate altercation, both of them refused to talk about it and said nothing had happened at all and the whole thing was fabricated. Town got burned down to the ground. And, it turns out there's something called the Bloody Summer. I think it's like 1919. It happened, these kind of race massacres all over the country, like town after town after town after town. And 1921 was like one of the last things that happened. So this had been going on places where people would just, a kind of a mob would go in and just like kill a bunch of black people and burn down their houses and the town. And, it's like become so typical in the history of this country post-slavery that it's created this kind of trauma, almost inescapable trauma, over and over and over and over again. So in a society like the Krishna movement, black people will join the movement thinking, wow, they're speaking about not being these bodies. They're speaking about being equal on the level of the soul, Brahmani Gavihastani, Pandita Samadarshana, that a saintly person sees with equal vision, even animals, what to speak of all levels of human beings, with seeing them the same as a soul. And I know that's important for us as we talk about things like our diet and stuff like that, right? So it's like, wow, a new vision of the world. But many of these black people in our society find racism, people find sexism and misogyny even within the Bhakti community. And it's like mind-boggling. Like, how can this be allowed to exist? So it's really a challenge. This subject is really a challenge for us, how to harmonize these things. Because, some people criticize Bhakti and say it's too cerebral. It's not connected with real life in the world. It's about escapism. I'm not this body, therefore let's not connect with this material world, and let's just be, in the spirit and doing kirtan and this kind of thing. But what we're talking about now is about applied active bhakti. How can we apply dharma towards the suffering of others to see anything that I can do to remove any obstacle that might be in your way to practicing Krishna consciousness? What can I do to serve you? Whether we're talking about race or we're talking about gender or whatever I can do to remove whatever obstacle may be there for others, that's my duty. And for myself, humbly, privately, personally, digging into my bhakti practice to see how have I contributed to my situation and how can I learn, from what's happening to me to be a better person. It's really quite a challenging thing, and we have a long way to go as a Bhakti community to really get this right. I know that's a fact. It's easy to fake it, but to do it right, we have a long way to go. But we have the tools.
Well, what are the tools?
Well, humility is a really important one. Humility. I like Radhanath Swami's definition of humility. He says, humility, one of the definitions he gives is humility is just seeing things as they really are. So I kind of have broken that down into like authenticity, humility. There's a part of it that's about being authentic. I think that's very important. I think taking personal responsibility is another important tool. This bit that Krishna says in Gita about not being attached to the results of your actions, but being attached to doing your dharma. So Krishna says, here's what you can be attached to. You can be attached to doing whatever, especially using Raghu's verse there of the swadharma. Like swadharma means like the eternal or like ever-present dharma, right? That's the transcendent dharma for all of us. It's like what connects us deeper and deeper and deeper to our soul existence, to Krishna. So we can be attached to that in all circumstances, but we can't be attached to the results. We have no control over the results.
And I'm sorry, but how do you? Let's bring this back to the topic of racism and how you feel that directly becomes a tool.
Well, for example, I think as a white-bodied person, seeing the situation of a black-bodied person, it's easy for me to say, well, this is the body that you have. This is the body that Krishna gave you. And with it comes a karmic package that you have to accept. Whether I want to be racist or not, you're in a black body, and this country, born into a black body at this time, gives you a certain package of suffering that I can't do anything about. You're going to be suffering by the way police treat you, by economic inequality, by the lower death rate or the higher death rate. Like, these are things I can't control. This is your karma. There's nothing I can do about this. And I think that that's the most insensitive way to approach this reality in the bhakti community. Whereas I think the right way to approach it is to say, whatever situation you may be in, how can I use my situation in support and service to you to help you, encourage you, and uplift you in your practice of bhakti? What is required of me to do that for you?
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying. It's getting back to, I think, something that you were discussing earlier, or you were hinting at least, and that is, there's different levels of depth that we have to apply this philosophy on, right? One level of depth means that anything that comes my way is really, it's my karma. This is, Brahma's prayer to Krishna, that Tatenu Kampam, one who, whatever troubles arise in their life from the
Tatenu Kampam Susamikshramana Bunjana Evatma Kritam Vipakam Hridvagapur Namaste Jivita Yo Mukti Padesa Dayabak.
Initiate that guy. Somebody initiate him now.
So that's let's say a deep level, but there's also kind of like a level, I don't know if you want to call it like a civic level or a political level. Now, if you look at Mahabharata, and I think this is what you're saying, I think, we need to look at, when you look at descriptions, political descriptions, right? What is from Shastra, from Gita, from Bhagavatam, and you look at the responsibility of the ruler. And in many cases, these rulers were like great yogis, right? That actually the responsibility placed on them is practically beyond like communism. It's like the government was entirely responsible for the well-being of the people.
Almost to a comic degree.
Yeah, like my son died before I did. I hold you, king. I hold you responsible.
Yeah,
for
there's
that,
like stories
right?
of the Brahmana going into Krishna's palace in Dwarka, and Krishna's grandfather's on the throne, and he puts the dead body of his son on the feet of the king and says, "What are you going to do about this?"
Right. I'm holding you responsible. Obviously, obviously our nation is not being run properly if this kind of thing is going on. And it wasn't even like, what the hell are you talking about? It was like, the king accepts it, like, yes, this is my responsibility.
Right.
So,
Any imbalance is my responsibility.
Right. So therefore, there's evidence, right? Draw a circle around that. There's evidence that, like, and what to speak of when you're in a democratic, nation, then that means that, we're all responsible for how we're being ruled, and we're all responsible for improving people's external material circumstances. We all kind of bear that responsibility. Does that relate to what you're saying? And you're saying even within the smaller spiritual community, we have to be thinking like this.
Yeah, I mean,
specifically.
So let me bring another level of kind of questioning around this. When we become part of a spiritual community, it's so easy to blame those in charge for what's going on, and so it's this interesting tension between responsibility and acceptance or something. I mean, like, in the Krishna community broadly, there's like a group of folks who get together and are like responsible for making decisions for the society internationally. But everyone's dealing with their own dramas. So if I see this inequality in our movement around, say, for example, the issue of race, you know, it doesn't help anyone for me to blame someone else. And in bhakti, I think the tension that I'm talking about is in bhakti, our responsibility is to say, this is the circumstance. Krishna's given me the ability to see this. What can I do about it? How can I help? Without being attached to the results, how can I fully invest myself in this solution? How can I be part of something better for my own community, at least? How can I give myself to this in a loving, humble, detached way? You know, we're challenged. I think we're challenged at this time to do something. Each one of us has been given a gift from bhakti, I would say. You know, and maybe many gifts. You know, some of us have found a way through difficulty or pain. Some of us have found a way to a deeper community. Some of us have found our voices through chanting or through kirtan. You know, some of us have found a deeper understanding of ourselves, right? There's so many gifts that come from bhakti. So with those gifts that we've been given, I think we're being invited to be exemplary and show how bhakti can be that missing piece that brings deep importance and value to our lives and the lives of those around us. Activated bhakti. I think it's vital in this time going forward.
But wouldn't almost anyone that's practicing bhakti feel like they're doing that? I'm setting the best example I can. I mean, can you be more specific about how that might play out, or how it plays out in your own life?
Well, you know, the aspect of service is so important in bhakti, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how are we serving? Who are we serving? And I think we're called in bhakti to understand that service requires an object of service. Ultimately, we're encouraged that if we can reach the highest levels of enlightenment, we're directly serving God and God's closest associates, right? But how do we get there? We get there by starting to serve those around us. I think bhakti has to be. I think bhakti has to be brought into tangible practice to really flower. I think we have to find someone to serve, and we have to serve them as if we're serving God in the most sincere way we can. So whatever the particular focus is, I think it's important for us to activate it. That bhakti can't be something we practice privately and then publicly we kind of, you know, live another life.
Do you see that as an absolute principle, or in other words, can no one practice bhakti privately? Must one become politically active?
I'm not saying that it has to be active in a political sphere at all. I'm saying it has to be active in some sort of it has to be expressed in some sort of an active way outside of our minds.
Right.
It doesn't have to be political. It doesn't have to be around any particular issue, but it has to be expressed in a practical way. That's, I guess, what I'm saying.
Where you can't be duplicitous. Is that what you're in? You can't have an external and an internal.
No, I guess what I'm inviting us to, and you two guys as close friends of mine and the broader community, I'm inviting you guys and myself into maybe what I see as the next level of engagement for me in bhakti, which is that it can't just be something I'm working on for myself. It has to be something that I'm inviting into my activity into the world. You know, that it's not enough for me to do my puja at home. I mean, not in the Gaudiya tradition. That's my understanding. Not in the Gaudiya tradition. In our tradition of Sri Chaitanya, we have a responsibility to activate it in a way that is inviting those around us to also take part, to see, to perceive it, and to taste it. And at a time like this where communities are in difficulty, it's such a great way and such a great time to try and activate bhakti in a way that is visible to others. You know, I don't think we should. I guess I don't think we should be afraid of expressing bhakti in ways that are political, in ways that are social. You know, and I've seen that growing up in the Krishna movement. People seem to have like a reticence of being involved in the public sphere because they don't want to be material.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's dangerous, honestly. I think it's important, you know, and Radhanath Swami speaks about this a lot. Like sometimes he's criticized by certain Orthodox folks for like having a hospital where they treat people, or like, food programs. Because it's like, what does that have to do with giving people bhakti? Having a hospital where people can go and get treatment. Isn't that just a social work? You know?
It's practical bhakti.
But it's practical bhakti. And I
That's a
feel
big
like,
thing of what we're trying to do. Practical bhakti.
yeah, like say for
It is
example,
internal. It is. We should have an internal life. We should have a. I like to worship my deity privately. I like to sort of chant.
it's
privately.
very important to have a private and personal bhakti practice. In fact, you can't, I would argue the same thing in reverse. You can't have a bhakti practice if it's not private and internal.
Yeah, but there's a practical bhakti too, and yeah, that's what say the hospital is demonstrating, or the food distribution to hungry people is demonstrating.
Yeah, like for example, during the presidency of President Trump, I found myself not wanting to say anything because I didn't want to offend anyone. You know, trying not to get political. People were so animated about it. It was creating so much tension. But there are times where you can say, as an aspiring Brahmin, as aspiring Bhakta, to say, that's not a very truthful thing to say. We should be more truthful. We should be speaking in a truthful way. So without becoming political, it is important for us to be activated in the world, not just quiet as we watch things go on around us. So, you know, for example, this issue of race, it's very important, I think, for when we're given the opportunity as bhaktas to step out and say, this is not the way things should be done. They should be done in this way, and we should help. You know, that it's not enough to have a private bhakti practice, that it's required that we bring bhakti out into the world in our own authentic way. It's going to be different for each of us, but in our own authentic way, not on high on a horse, but coming down and meeting people where they are and saying, how can I use my bhakti to serve you? Otherwise, maybe I'm not fully practicing my bhakti.
Maybe on a little horse, not on a high horse, a tiny little pony. Gaura, you do it so wonderfully, and that's why right now I'm going to Spotify after this song, and I'm going to look up Compass by Gaura Vani and his daughter.
I also would love to. Can I mention Patreon? We have our Patreon page. My family and I are on Patreon. So I know you guys are already locked in supporting Wisdom of the Sages with $100 a month.
Forget us. Go right to Gaura Vani's page.
But please check out Gaura Vani, patreon.com/Gaura Vani. If you want to connect with our music, new music coming out, new songs, please, we would love to see you there. Thank you for this opportunity. I love you guys. You're deep, you're powerful, you're incredible, you're examples.